I heard my daughter talking on the phone. Dad is such an idiot, Emma. Mom's boyfriend practically lives. The crystal tumbler felt heavy in Harrison Shaw's hand as he savored his nightly bourbon. A small reward for closing the $200 million Riverside development deal. The amber liquid caught the dim hallway light as he passed his daughter's bedroom, preparing to share the good news with 17-year-old Lily. But her voice, pitched low and conspiratorial, stopped him cold. Dad's so stupid, Emma. Lily's words sliced through the mahogany door. He actually thinks Mom's upset about him traveling so much. Like, hello, Ryan practically lives here during Dad's business trips. Harrison's fingers tightened around the glass, the ice cubes clinking softly, a discordant note in the sudden silence of his world. I mean, they're not even subtle anymore. Lily giggled, twisting something in Harrison's chest. Mom says once Dad's inheritance clears, we're all moving to Chicago together. New life, new start. The bourbon turned bitter on his tongue. Rebecca, his wife of 12 years, the woman he trusted to help raise Lily after Sarah's death. The same woman who'd encouraged him to take more business trips this past year, who insisted he focus on expanding Shaw Development's reach. Ryan says the timing has to be perfect. Lily's voice dropped lower, taking on an edge of importance that made Harrison lean closer. Once they have control of Shaw Development, the board won't have a choice about approving the marina project. Not that it matters. The environmental impact study was totally faked anyway. The glass nearly slipped from Harrison's grip. Ryan, not just any Ryan. Ryan Blackwood, the EPA oversight director who'd fast-tracked approvals for the marina project. The same man who'd been surprisingly amenable to every modification, every deadline adjustment. Harrison pulled back from the door, his mind racing through every interaction, every meeting. Those convenient inspection schedules. The way Rebecca always knew the status of his projects. The careful questions about his father's health. He moved silently down the hallway, each step measured and controlled. In his study, he placed the untouched bourbon on his desk and pulled out his phone. Not to confront. Not yet. First, he needed to understand the depth of the betrayal. 3 calls later, his private investigator, Jack Monroe, was heading to the office. I need everything, Harrison said quietly. Every meeting, every phone call, every document that's crossed my father's desk in the last year. Your wife's activities, too. Jack's voice was professional. Careful, especially those. Harrison's gaze fell on the family photo on his desk. Rebecca, Lily, himself, all smiling, all eyes. And Jack, I need the real environmental impact data for the marina project. The actual studies, not the ones that cross my desk. This is going to get expensive, Jack warned. Money's not an issue. Harrison opened his laptop, accessing the offshore accounts he'd maintained since Sarah's death. What matters is discretion. No one can know we're looking, especially not my daughter. After ending the call, Harrison poured himself a fresh bourbon. This one he drained. The familiar burn couldn't match the cold fury building in his chest. Rebecca hadn't just betrayed their marriage. She'd corrupted his daughter, threatened his company, and compromised everything he'd built. But she'd made one critical. She thought she was dealing with a broken man. Someone too caught up in business to notice the decay in his own home. She didn't know about Geneva, about the contingencies he'd put in place after Sarah died. She didn't know that Harrison Shaw had learned long ago never to keep all his power in one place. The next morning, Harrison maintained his routine with practiced precision. Breakfast with the family. Coffee while Rebecca detailed her plans for redecorating the sunroom. He kissed goodbye as he headed to work. Instead, he met Jack in a private room at the Carlton Hotel. It's worse than you thought, Jack said, spreading photos across the table. Every business trip you've taken in the past 18 months coincided with EPA inspections at your project sites. Harrison studied the surveillance photos, Rebecca and Ryan entering hotels, restaurants, his own house. But it was the timestamps that told the real story. These meetings. Harrison tapped one photo. They're all scheduled around board votes or regulatory deadlines. They're organized, Jack confirmed. Your wife didn't stumble into this affair. She chose Ryan Blackwood specifically. Look at these. More photos. Rebecca at lunch with other EPA officials. Ryan meeting with competitors who'd mysteriously withdrawn their bids on key properties. The marina project isn't their first target, Jack continued. They've done this before. Different cities, different companies. Ryan moves in, finds a vulnerable executive, and Rebecca provides the vulnerability. Harrison finished, his voice steady, but his eyes had turned to steel. What about my father? Jack hesitated. That's where it gets interesting. I spoke with his nurse, Maria Torres. Your wife visits every Tuesday afternoon. I know. She brings him magazines, keeps him company. She brings papers, legal documents disguised as medical forms. Your father's signature is on transfer authorizations, board resolutions. Harrison's fist came down on the table, the first crack in his composure. He's dying of cancer, and they're using using that, too. He stopped, drawing a deep breath. What's their endgame? Control. Jack pulled out more documents. Once your inheritance clears, you'll own controlling interest in Shaw Development. But these transfers your father's been signing. They're setting up a complex web of shell corporations. On paper, you'll have the power. In reality, Rebecca and Ryan will control everything. Harrison stood, moving to the window below. Chicago's business district hummed with activity, oblivious to the betrayal being orchestrated in its midst. And my daughter? She's been there, eyes and ears. Every time you've worked from home, every private call, she's been reporting back. Her trust fund isn't just generous. Harrison, it's being managed by one of Ryan's shell companies. Harrison's reflection in the window showed no emotion, but his words carried deadly weight. They've turned my child into a spy. There's one more thing. Jack pulled out a final folder. Your first wife's accident. I found some irregularities in the original investigation. Harrison turned slowly. Sarah's death wasn't random. I need more time to confirm, but Jack's phone buzzed. He checked it, frowning. Your wife just accessed your father's medical records. She's moving faster than we expected. No, Harrison said quietly. She's moving exactly as I need her to. He pulled out his phone, dialing a number from memory. Thomas, it's Harrison Shaw. I need to see my father's lawyer. Tonight, the law offices of Brandenburg and Associates cast long shadows in the Chicago twilight. Harrison sat across from Gerald Brandenburg, his father's lawyer of 30 years, watching as the older man reviewed the documents Jack had provided. Gerald removed his glasses, rubbing his eyes. Harrison, this is systematic corporate theft. These medical forms your father signed. They're transferring control of key subsidiaries to offshore entities. Can it be reversed? Some of it. But Harrison, there's more. Gerald pulled out another file. Your daughter's trust fund. The one Rebecca insisted on setting up last year. It's structured as a corporate holding company. Once these transfers are complete, Lily will technically control 30% of Shaw Development's voting rights, which Rebecca will control until Lily turns 25. Harrison's voice was ice. They're using my daughter as a corporate puppet. Exactly. And with Ryan Blackwood's position at the EPA, they can force through the Marina project approval, tank the company's value, and walk away with millions while destroying everything your father built. Harrison stood, moving to the window. The city lights blurred into a constellation of betrayal. What they don't know is that I've been expecting something like this. Not this exactly, but something. Gerald raised an eyebrow. The Geneva account. After Sarah died, I learned the hard way that trust is a luxury I can't afford. Harrison turned back to the desk. Show me everything they've signed, everything they've moved. I need to know exactly what pieces they think they control. For the next hour, they traced the web. I needed to know exactly what pieces they thought they controlled. For the next hour, I traced the web of deception. Shell companies nested within holding companies, offshore accounts linked to seemingly legitimate businesses. And at the center, the Marina project, a development that would make millions on paper while devastating the local ecosystem. The real environmental impact study, Harrison said finally. Where is it? Gerald opened his briefcase, removing a sealed envelope. Your father had it conducted privately months ago. The results, they're devastating. Harrison, if this data becomes public, the company would barely survive. But the criminal charges for submitting false environmental reports. Harrison smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. Those would be harder to overcome. What are you planning? Gerald asked. Justice. Harrison replied, taking the envelope. But first I need you to draft new papers. Transfer documents, board resolutions, everything they've done. I want parallel versions, all legitimate, all ready to file. You're going to trap them with their own plan? No. Harrison's voice was quiet, but it carried the weight of absolute certainty. I'm going to let them think they've won. And I'll show them what a real corporate takeover looks like. He pulled out his phone, checking the time. Rebecca will be home soon, expecting to find me drunk and angry about the deal closing. Instead, she'll find dinner reservations and champagne. You're celebrating? I'm setting the stage. Harrison gathered his coat. They think they're destroying my life. I'll let them think that until the moment I destroy theirs. As he left the office, Harrison's phone buzzed with a text from coming home late, Dad. Study group with Emma. He texted back. No problem, sweetie. Love you. The words tasted like ash. But Harrison Shaw had learned long ago that revenge, like business, required a perfect poker face. Let them think they were winning. Let them think he was blind. Geneva was waiting. And unlike Rebecca, Harrison knew the value of patience. In his car, he made one final call. Jack, I need you to find out everything you can about Lily's friend Emma. Something about that connection doesn't feel right. The pieces were in place. The game was set. And Harrison Shaw had no intention of being the fool they thought he was. Rebecca, Shaw's morning began like any other day. of untitled luxury. She sipped Dom Perignon at her favorite salon while scrolling through property listings in Chicago's Gold Coast. The text from her American Express concierge was the first ripple in her perfectly curated Mrs. Shaw. We're unable to process your annual membership renewal. She dismissed it as a technical glitch until her platinum card was declined for a mere $112,000 handbag at Bergdorf's. The sales associate's smirk made her blood boil. Try this one, Rebecca demanded, slapping down her private black card. Declined. Each successive card met the same fate. Her face burning hotter with each rejection. Her phone buzzed. Ryan Blackwood's name flashing on screen. Emergency office. Now, she found him in his EPA office. The usual arrogant swagger replaced by barely contained panic. Spread across his desk were documents she never expected to see in the light of day. He knows. Ryan's hands shook as he held up the divorce papers. Not just about us. Everything. Ryan. Rebecca snatched the filing from his grip, her practice poise crumbling as she read. Harrison hadn't just filed for divorce. He'd submitted comprehensive federal whistleblower documentation. Every falsified environmental study, every manipulated inspection, every bribed official documented, with a precision that made her stomach turn. Impossible, she hissed. We controlled every variable. The real studies were destroyed. Apparently not. Ryan pulled up his banking app. All my offshore accounts are frozen. Federal investigation pending. Even the Cayman transfers are locked. Rebecca's phone lit up with notifications. Their joint accounts drained. Her private accounts frozen. But it was the alert from her daughter's trust fund that made her manicured nails dig into her palms. All holdings converted to Shaw Development shares. That son of A. She snarled. He's turned everything into worthless paper. Once this environmental data goes public, we'll be ruined, Ryan finished. And that's if we avoid prison. Her lawyer called next. Rebecca had always enjoyed the way Andrew Porter cringed when she berated him. Not today, Mrs. Shaw, he said. The FBI. She hung up, her hands shaking. Where'd he go? She demanded. Harrison doesn't just vanish. He's too arrogant, too controlling. Ryan handed her a single sheet of cream-colored stationery. Harrison's precise handwriting carried a message that chilled her more than the empty accounts. Check the real environmental impact data. What game is he playing? Rebecca's voice rose to a pitch that would have embarrassed her in calmer moments. No game. Ryan's face had gone ashen. This morning's mail brought subpoenas for every project I've overseen in the last 5 years. Harrison didn't just run. He orchestrated a symphony of destruction. Neither noticed the small red light blinking on Ryan's office phone, recording every panicked admission for an FBI surveillance team in the parking garage below. Maria Torres, known to them only as Walter Shaw's nurse, sat in an unmarked car with her FBI radio. Subjects are in place. She murmured, recording everything. The next 72 hours became a masterclass in systematic destruction. Every attempt to access funds triggered deeper audits. Each call to corporate contacts revealed blocked access. Rebecca's carefully cultivated network of influence crumbled like the facade it had always been. You don't understand? She snapped at her fourth lawyer in 3 days. I need those accounts unfrozen now. You know who I am? Soon-to-be defendant in a federal fraud case. Andrew Porter replied with newfound spine. Every transaction attempt creates new evidence. You're doing their job for them. Then discredit him. Rebecca's composure shattered. Mental breakdown, creative accounting. Whatever it takes. That's what I pay you for. Not anymore. I'm withdrawing as counsel. Porter's tone shifted to one she'd never heard him use. Honesty. This isn't just environmental fraud, Mrs. Shaw. Money laundering, conspiracy, corporate espionage. Find a criminal defense attorney. You'll need one. The line went dead. Rebecca hurled her phone across her marble-floored living room, shattering a crystal vase from her wedding. She stared at the fragments, remembering Harrison's face as she'd opened that gift. Had he known even then? Had he seen through her? Her phone buzzed from among the crystal shards. Lily, Mom. Her daughter's voice carried an unfamiliar edge. Something's wrong. I tried warning Ryan about the FBI, but my calls. You did what? Rebecca's blood ran cold on your phone. The one your father. She caught herself too late. The one. Dad, what? Steele entered Lily's voice. Did you know my phones were tapped? That every call I made trying to warn Ryan just became evidence? Lily, listen carefully. No, you listen. The teenager's voice cracked with fury. The FBI just show me transcripts. Every conversation. Every time you and Ryan used me to spy on Dad. My trust fund. It wasn't for college. It was payment for gathering intelligence. We were protecting you. Rebecca tried to save it. They're asking about Sarah, Dad's first wife. The accident. That wasn't an accident. The line went dead, leaving Rebecca alone with memories she'd tried to bury. Sarah's death had been before her time, but she knew the organization had arranged it, just like they'd arranged her chance meeting with Harrison afterward. A grieving man, a sympathetic shoulder. Her phone buzzed again. Unknown number. Mrs. Shaw. A woman's voice, clinical in its professionalism. Agent Catherine Martinez, FBI. Let's discuss your Tuesday visits to Walter Shaw's nursing home. Rebecca sank onto her imported silk sofa. The nurse, the weekly visits, the papers, the hidden camera footage. Rebecca sank onto her imported silk sofa. The nurse, the weekly visits, the papers. The hidden camera footage was particularly interesting. Martinez continued, "Would you like to come voluntarily, or should we send a car?" Special Agent Catherine Martinez watched through one-way glass as Rebecca Shaw's carefully constructed world dissolved into orange polyester and fingerprint ink. Beside her, Emma, her daughter, her ace in the hole, shed her teenage persona like an outgrown skin. "Lily's asking questions," Emma reported. "About me?" "About everything." She's starting to piece it together. Catherine studied her daughter's reflection in the glass. At 17, Emma had already mastered skills that had taken Catherine years to develop. She got closer than any other agent could. Harrison's evidence combined with your recordings. It's bulletproof. It's bigger than Rebecca and Ryan now, Emma said. Lily's talking names, dates, other projects. She didn't understand what she was part of, but she remembered everything. Like father, like daughter. Catherine's voice softened. This case had cost her daughter something precious. Perhaps her last chance at a normal teenage friendship. Harrison's handler is bringing him in from protective custody next week. Phase 2 begins. In another interview room, Lily Shaw sat surrounded by transcripts of her own betrayal. "I didn't know," she repeated, mascara tracing black rivers down her cheeks. "About Sarah, about any of it. I thought Mom loved him." Agent Thomas Chun, Harrison's FBI handler, studied the girl who'd unknowingly helped expose a decades-long conspiracy. "Tell me about the first time your mother introduced you to Ryan. The real story." Lily's hands trembled as she wiped her eyes. "It was before Dad's Seattle trip. Mom said Ryan was an old friend who needed help fixing some environmental problems. She said Dad was too focused on profits, and that sometimes good people had to bend the rules." She stopped, fresh tears falling. She made it sound noble, like we were saving something instead of destroying it. Chun kept his voice gentle. "When did Emma enter the picture?" "Last year. New girl at school. We just connected." Lily's voice broke. Was any of it real, or was she just another lie? Chun glanced at the mirror, knowing Catherine was listening. "Emma Martinez made a choice to help stop some very bad people, just like your father did, and just like you're doing now." "My father?" Lily looked up, eyes red, but finally clear. "Where is he? Is he safe?" "He's safe," Chun assured her. "And when this is over, you'll understand why he had to disappear. Why he had to let you think he'd abandoned everything." In her office, Catherine reviewed Harrison Shaw's latest transmission. Pages of account numbers, shell companies, offshore transactions, a decade of corruption mapped with architectural precision. But it was the last page that caught her eye. A photograph of Sarah Shaw on her wedding day, smiling at a future she'd never see. Her secure line buzzed. Martinez nodded. "Geneva's ready." Harrison's voice carried the calm of a man who'd waited 20 years for this moment. Time to show them what a real conspiracy looks like. Catherine smiled, thinking of Emma's sacrifice, of Lily's tears, of Sarah's photograph. Rebecca thought she'd married a businessman. She'd actually married an architect of revenge, someone who'd spent 2 decades designing the perfect trap. Now that trap was ready to spring, and Catherine Martinez had a front-row seat to what promised to be elegant demolition in FBI history. In his secure location, Harrison Shaw closed his encrypted laptop and studied his own copy of Sarah's photograph. "Almost done, love," he whispered. "Almost done." The Chicago Tribune's front page dominated every newsstand across the city's financial district. Environmental scandal claims another EPA director, Ryan Blackwood, sentenced. Below the headline, a photo showed Ryan being led into the federal courthouse, his once pristine suit replaced by prison orange, his trademark arrogance shattered by 3 years of investigation. In a secured interview room, Lily Shaw reviewed transcripts of her own recorded conversations. At 20, she carried herself with a heart and grace that came from surviving betrayal. Gone were the designer clothes her mother had used to buy her loyalty. Instead, she wore a simple black blazer and slacks, practical armor for practical times. Special Agent Thomas Chun set another stack of files on the table. "Walk me through the trust fund payments again. When did you first notice the pattern?" "Junior year, after Dad's Seattle project." Lily's fingers traced the deposit records. $10,000 appeared after I told Mom about his private calls. $20,000 after I forwarded his emails. She called them performance bonuses for helping protect the environment. She nodded, opening a folder filled with surveillance photos. Your mother was systematic. Each payment coincided with specific information leaks. I was so stupid. Lily's laugh held no warmth. The amounts kept growing. $50,000 after I installed her special software on Dad's home office computer. $100,000 when I started recording his board meetings. She picked up one of the photos. Rebecca at a charity gala, arm in arm with another CEO who'd later been indicted. How many others were there before Dad? We've confirmed 3 other executives, all development companies, all with major environmental projects. Chun, spread out more photographs. Your mother spent years perfecting her. Find a vulnerable target, usually a widower or recent divorcee, establish an emotional connection, then slowly compromise them through their children. Like she did with me. You were different, Lily. You fought back. Your testimony has helped us unravel corruption cells in 12 states. Across the building, Rebecca Shaw sat in her own interview room, her orange jumpsuit clashing with her still perfect manicure. Federal prosecutor Diana Hawthorne reviewed notes from 3 years of investigation. Let's discuss the Marina project timeline. Hawthorne said, when did you first target Harrison Shaw? Rebecca's smile didn't reach her eyes. You make it sound so calculated. Harrison was. I provided comfort. Like you provided comfort to James Anderson in Seattle or Michael Chan in San Francisco. Hawthorne slid more photographs across the table. Both widowers, both with teenage children, both running companies with major environmental projects. Mere coincidence. What about Sarah Shaw's accident? Still claiming that was coincidence, too. For a moment, Rebecca's mask slipped. That was before my involvement. I simply followed the established protocol. Protocol from whom? You know I won't answer that. Her composure returned. But I will say Harrison was supposed to break. They all break eventually. She gestured at her prison uniform. Well, you can see how that turned out. A commotion erupted in the hallway. Ryan Blackwood, being escorted to his sentencing hearing, caught sight of Rebecca through the door's window, his face contorted with rage. You promised me protection, he shouted, struggling against his guards. He said the offshore accounts were untraceable. Mr. Blackwood, his lawyer, attempted to intervene. She planned everything. The fake studies, the bribes. Sarah Shaw's death. It was all Rebecca. She's been running this operation for years. As guards dragged him away, Rebecca's carefully constructed defense crumbled under the weight of Ryan's desperate accusations. The private banking floor of Credit SS exuded old-world discretion from its mahogany panels to the hushed conversations in multiple languages. Harrison Shaw sat across from Anton Mueller. In multiple languages, Harrison Shaw sat across from Anton Mueller, the bank's chief of private client services, watching as a vault sealed for 2 decades was finally opened. The documents remain exactly as you left them, Mr. Shaw, Mueller said, placing a weathered leather portfolio on the desk. Though the FBI's authentication request was unusual, Special Agent Catherine Martinez observed as Harrison opened the portfolio. Inside lay the fruits of 20 years of patience. Photographs, account ledgers, trading records, a meticulously documented trail of corruption. But the true prize was a single USB drive containing every original environmental impact study his father had commissioned. Walter Shaw was thorough, Martinez noted, examining a particularly detailed series of photographs showing Rebecca meeting with known environmental crime figures. He tracked them for years. My father understood patience, Harrison replied, his voice emotionless as he sifted through 2 decades of evidence. He knew they'd try again after Sarah. He just needed someone they'd underestimate. So he let them send Rebecca, knowing I'd already established the Geneva account and recognized their pattern when it emerged. Harrison allowed himself a small smile. They thought they were corrupting another grieving executive. They didn't realize they were walking into a 20-year trap. The evidence from Geneva went far beyond Rebecca and Ryan. It exposed a network of corrupt officials spanning multiple agencies, compromised environmental projects across 3 continents, and a web of shell companies that made the Marina project look like a high school science experiment. This is just the beginning, Martinez said, reviewing account numbers that led to prominent names. With these records, we could track the money all the way to the top. That was always the plan. Harrison closed the portfolio. My father knew direct confrontation would fail. They killed Sarah for far less evidence than this. He needed someone on the inside, someone they thought they could control. And they chose me. They chose poorly. The federal courthouse buzzed with tension as Rebecca's sentencing approached. 3 years of investigations had exposed corruption at every level of environmental oversight. But today, justice would finally catch up with its architect. Judge Eleanor Eleanor Martinez studied the pre-sentencing report, her expression darkening with each page before pronouncing sentence. Several matters must be addressed. She fixed Rebecca with a steely gaze. The death of Sarah Shaw was not an accident. Evidence gathered by Walter Shaw and later compiled by Harrison Shaw proves conclusively that it was orchestrated by the defendant's organization. Mrs. Shaw was targeted after discovering fraudulent environmental impact studies. The same pattern of corruption this court has spent 3 years unraveling. Rebecca's face remained impassive, but her knuckles whitened as she gripped the defense table. Furthermore, the judge continued, the defendant's subsequent marriage to Harrison Shaw was not coincidence, but calculation. The court has reviewed evidence showing a systematic pattern of targeting bereaved executives through their children, using family connections to facilitate environmental crimes. In the gallery, Lily watched her mother's mask finally crack. Every bedtime story, every shopping trip, every moment of supposed maternal love, all exposed as tactical moves in a decades-long con. The cooperation of Emma Martinez provided crucial documentation of the defendant's methods. Judge Martinez noted the recorded conversation between MS. Shaw and Ms. Martinez revealed not just individual crimes, but an entire methodology of corruption. Lily glanced at Emma, seated with Catherine across the courtroom. Their friendship had survived the truth, perhaps because Emma's initial deception had led to something genuine. This court views the defendant's actions as representing the worst form of environmental crime, the judge declared, using family bonds to facilitate corporate fraud, manipulating a child into betraying her own father, participating in a conspiracy that resulted in Sarah Shaw's death. The damage to both the environment and human lives is incalculable. The sentence fell like a hammer. 30 years without parole, complete asset forfeiture and restitution exceeding $50 million. As Rebecca was led away, Harrison entered silently through a side door. He hadn't attended the trial, hadn't given her the satisfaction of seeing him testify. But this moment, this final confirmation that justice transcended generations, he needed to witness. Their eyes met briefly. Rebecca saw not the vulnerable widower she had targeted, but an architect of vengeance who'd spent 20 years ensuring her destruction. Harrison saw not his wife of 12 years, but a trap that had finally snapped shut on its maker. Later, in his restored office at Shaw Developments, Harrison arranged 3 photographs on his wall. Sarah smiling on their wedding day, his father, whose patient accumulation of evidence had made justice possible, and a new addition, Lily and Emma at their college graduation, proof that truth could forge stronger bonds than deception. Between them, he placed the original environmental impact study from Geneva, a reminder that some legacies are measured not in profit margins, but in debts finally paid. A knock at his door preceded Lily's entrance. Dad, the FBI's task force wants to brief us. They've identified 3 more with suspicious environmental studies. Harrison turned to his daughter, seeing in her face the strength that had emerged from betrayal. You're still working with them. Emma and I both are. Someone has to protect the next family they target. Lily moved to stand beside him, studying the photographs. I understand now why Grandpa kept gathering evidence, even when he couldn't use it. Why you waited so long to spring the trap. Justice requires patience, Harrison said, and strength to see it through like you had. Like we all did. Outside his office window, Chicago's skyline reached toward the future. Somewhere in those towers, other corrupt networks were already moving to fill the void left by Rebecca's organization. But they'd find a different landscape now, one where truth had proven stronger than greed, and justice no longer required a grieving man's lifelong vengeance to prevail. The real environmental impact study remained in Geneva, proof that some victories aren't measured in stock prices or profit margins, but in the simple triumph of right over wrong, of patience over corruption, of truth over the most elaborate lies. In his desk drawer, Harrison kept one final piece of evidence, a photograph he'd never shown the FBI. It showed Rebecca meeting with a figure whose identity would shake the very foundations of environmental oversight. But that, he knew, was a battle for another day. Some traps required decades to set, and Harrison Shaw had learned the value of patience. Epilogue 10 years later, a federal correctional institution in Wausau, Minnesota, was a far cry from Rebecca Shaw's former Gold Coast penthouse. The woman who once orchestrated environmental crimes worth billions now spent her days in 8x10 cell, her designer wardrobe replaced by prison-issue khaki, her once perfectly manicured hands roughened by mandatory labor. 13 years into her 30-year sentence. With all appeals exhausted, Rebecca's arrogance had finally crumbled. The isolation wing where she resided, a consequence of multiple attempts to manipulate other inmates, offered ample time to reflect on her downfall. Her last visitor had been 3 years ago, a federal prosecutor seeking information about other members of her organization. Rebecca's attempt to negotiate had backfired spectacularly when they revealed they already had everything they needed from Ryan. From Ryan Blackwood. Her former partner in crime had broken completely, serving his 25-year sentence in a medium security facility in Colorado. He turned state's evidence against everyone he'd ever worked with. His cooperation had helped unravel corruption cases in 14 states, though it hadn't reduced his own sentence. The last Rebecca heard, Ryan spent his days in protective custody, jumping at shadows, convinced that former associates would eventually reach him. His fears weren't entirely unfounded. 3 other members of their former network had met suspicious ends in various prisons across the country. Meanwhile, Shaw Developments had not only survived, but thrived. Harrison's exposure of the corruption ring had ironically positioned the company as a leader in environmental compliance. Under his leadership, they pioneered a transparent approach to development that set new industry standards. The Chicago Business Journal's latest profile of Harrison Shaw painted a picture of redemption and innovation. The article sat on Rebecca's metal desk, its headline a daily reminder of her failure. Shaw Developments leads Green Revolution. CEO Harrison Shaw receives Presidential Environmental Award. The photo showed Harrison at the White House ceremony, distinguished, in his 50s, still handsome, but somehow harder. Beside him stood Lily, now 30, a federal prosecutor specializing in environmental crimes. The irony wasn't lost on Rebecca. The daughter she had tried to corrupt had become a weapon against everything she'd built. Emma Martinez was featured in the article, too. After graduating from law school, she joined Lily in the Justice Department. The friendship Rebecca had tried to exploit had evolved into a formidable legal partnership. Together, they'd secured convictions in some of the largest environmental fraud cases in history. Catherine Martinez had retired from the FBI, but her legacy continued. The task force she'd helped create had expanded into an international operation, tracking environmental crimes across borders. She still consulted occasionally, especially when Shaw Development's expertise was needed to unravel complex corporate fraud. The old nurse, Maria Torres, the undercover agent who documented Rebecca's manipulation of Walter Shaw, had received a commendation for her role in the investigation. She went on to train other agents in long-term undercover operations, using the Shaw case as a template. Walter Shaw hadn't lived to see Rebecca's sentencing, but his foresight had changed environmental law enforcement forever. The evidence he'd accumulated, combined with Harrison's strategic patience, had exposed corruption at every level of regulatory oversight. The file Harrison had kept in Geneva didn't just end Rebecca's organization. It sparked investigations that reached into corporate boardrooms, regulatory agencies, and even Congress. Each conviction carried a piece of Walter Shaw's legacy, a testament to one man's dedication to justice. Sarah Shaw's death had finally been officially ruled a homicide, though the actual perpetrators remained elusive. The cold case unit still received anonymous tips occasionally, each one meticulously investigated. Harrison had never stopped searching for the whole truth about his first wife's murder. In his office at Shaw Development's new headquarters, a model of sustainable architecture, Harrison kept an updated wall of photographs. Sarah and Walter remained central now, joined by newer images. Lily receiving her law degree. Emma and Catherine at FBI award ceremonies. A dedicated team that had helped rebuild the company. The original environmental impact study from Geneva had been donated to a law school's environmental crimes division, used to train future prosecutors in detecting corporate fraud. Its findings had helped establish new standard for environmental review, turning Shaw Development's darkest hour into a catalyst for industry-wide reform. Lily's personal life had taken an unexpected turn. She'd married David Chin, son of Agent Thomas Chin, creating another bond between the families that had exposed Rebecca's crimes. Their 2 children would never know their grandmother, except as a cautionary tale about greed and betrayal. The trust fund money that Rebecca had used to buy Lily's complicity had been channeled into a foundation supporting environmental whistleblowers. Each year, it helped expose new crimes, protect new witnesses, and ensure that other families wouldn't face the same corruption that had nearly destroyed the Shaws. Emma had declined to follow her mother, Catherine, into the FBI, preferring to fight environmental crime from the Justice Department. She'd inherited Catherine's instincts. Her current investigation, still confidential. Sources suggested that some of Rebecca's old associates had started rebuilding their network. Harrison watched these developments with careful attention. The photograph he'd kept hidden, the one showing Rebecca with a figure whose identity could shake environmental oversight to its core, had finally served its purpose. The investigation it sparked was proceeding quietly, methodically, with the same patience that had once brought Rebecca down in her prison cell. Reaction. Rebecca had one final reminder of her. The commissary television occasionally showed news about Shaw Development's latest environmental initiatives. Each broadcast was a testament to what she'd failed to destroy. A company that had emerged stronger, more principled, and more successful than ever. She'd written to Lily once, years ago, attempting to manipulate her daughter one last time. Lily's response had been a copy of her federal prosecutor's badge and a note reading, "Justice finds its own path." Ryan, in a separate prison, had deteriorated further. His attempts to write a book had been blocked by the courts, his remaining assets seized for restitution. The brilliant EPA director who'd once commanded respect through fear now commanded nothing, not even his daily routine. The Marina Project site, the development that had triggered Rebecca's downfall, had been transformed into an environmental research center. Scientists there studied the ecosystem she had tried to destroy, their work funded by penalties paid by convicted conspirators. Harrison's patient vengeance had rippled far beyond Chicago. Environmental crime units worldwide now studied the Shaw case, learning how corruption could hide behind corporate veils and family ties. Rebecca's methodology had become a textbook example of how not to succeed in corporate crime. The scale of justice that Walter Shaw had first set in motion had finally balanced. His son had transformed a personal vendetta into systemic change. His granddaughter prosecuted crimes he'd first documented. And somewhere in Geneva, in a quiet bank vault, other evidence waited. Proof that some legacies of justice span generations. Rebecca had one final decade to serve, assuming good behavior she'd never managed to maintain. Ryan had 15 years left, his cooperation buying him little mercy from judges who'd seen the full scope of his crimes. Their invisible masters had largely escaped justice, but their power had been broken. And in his office, overlooking the cleaner, more vigilant Chicago, Harrison Shaw kept planning, kept watching, kept building. A photograph in his desk suggested there was more work to be done. But he had learned from his father that justice requires patience, and from Sarah that some debts demand a lifetime to repay. The environmental impact study in Geneva had started all, but it was the impact of truth, slow-moving but unstoppable, that had finally written an ending even Rebecca couldn't corrupt.